What's going on, everybody? My name is Justin, and you are now tuned in to the Pivot Mindset Podcast. Man, I am so glad that you are here with me. I'm so glad that you have decided to join me in this journey, join me in this endeavor. For many of you that don't know me, this is episode one. This is a much anticipated thing that I have struggled and really prayed about. And really, for me, I think the best word to explain this podcast is alignment. For me, this podcast just culminates so many parts of who I am, things from my experience, my past, my strengths, that I can be able to pour into a new thing that I'm doing. So I'm excited. This is episode one of the Pivot Mindset Podcast. Now, you may be wondering, for any of you that don't know me, a little bit of background about myself. Again, my name is Justin. I am the host of the podcast. You'll be hearing from me for the most part, but then we will also have guests that will be on the episodes periodically. But for myself, I am just turned 30 this year. If you're listening to this episode, this is in 2021, just turned 30 years old. I have two beautiful children, as well as a wife of 8 years. And for me, my life has been extremely pivoted. I have lived what I would call a pivoted life, meaning a life that has had many different ups and downs, shifts and changes, and pivots, quite frankly. I'm going to take a step back a little bit. Pivots, for anyone that isn't familiar with the term, because, it's not a common term. It's not one that's always used. But when I say pivot, and the genesis of this podcast is how you have to often be able to stop on a dime and be able to shift. Pivot is really a term I come to know and realize in basketball. I'm playing basketball growing up. You would be able to pivot, and that was when you would you would have the ball, but you were able, as long as your pivot foot stayed on the ground, you could rotate and move any which direction and put you in a better position or a better spot to either shoot the basketball, or it would put you in a better position to pass the basketball to someone else. And so, when I came up with the idea of this podcast, I was really thinking about something that would correlate to the kind of life that I think so many of us have to live. And that is a pivoted life. And I personally believe that life is all about the pivots. And those that decide to make pivots in their lives, those who decide to make the changes, who decide to make the adjustments, who decides to make the shifts, those are the individuals that I believe we start to see tons of success with. If you research any people that have been able to reach any great amount of success or a great amount of notoriety, whatever success means to you, we will find somewhere in their history that they had to make pivots and changes. They had to make shifts. And one thing that I know about life, and I've gained some of this experience over the 30 years that I've lived it, but one of the things that I know most about life is life does not have any definite decisions. Let me repeat that again. Life does not have any definite decisions until you die. That's the only definite decision when it comes to life. But if you are still breathing, if you're listening to the sound of my voice, you understand that there may have been times in your life that you were kicked, times in your life where you have failed, times in your life where you may have failed other people, or you may have fallen short of the goal. But because you are still alive, your decision has not been final. So you may have failed at something, but that does not mean you are a failure. And so that's me, guys. Like, to me, that is when I say I've lived a pivoted life, I've lived a life that has had ups. I lived a life that has had downs, but I've learned so much more in my downs that now on the climb back up, I want to be able to encourage and motivate and inspire people that you can make a pivot in your life, that you can make a shift. And that no matter what you've experienced, no matter what you've been through, you too can change. You too can experience better. You too can experience redemption. And so throughout the duration of this podcast, my vision, my goal for it is really that we will bring people on this podcast to really talk about their pivoted life, that we will bring individuals on that can talk about not just their successes, but I want to talk about failures, guys. I want to talk about the times when people thought everything was over, when they thought they were down and out, when they didn't know that if they had another option, but they found a way to make it work. Again, for me personally, I am someone that I like to read a lot. I'm always listening to audibles. That's kind of the form in which I personally gain a lot of information. YouTube University is, that's in my kind of personal development bag, if you will. Audible, I'm always listening to Audible, and then podcasts. Those are the three things. And I also have a business coach. So for me, personal development is of extreme importance. And I do also know that personal development is not important to everybody. So, it's something that, to me, if you're listening to this podcast, personal development is important to you. Mindset is super important, guys. And that's the Pivot Mindset podcast, because no matter what you hear, you can hear information, you could listen to a sermon, you could listen to an inspiring motivational speech, and it may get you fired up for a short amount of time. You may get fired up to be able to take small action or to be able to make a decision quickly. But that's an emotional decision that people typically make when they may hear a message or they may hear something or read something that inspires them. But you also have to go back to your normal life eventually. And your normal life, if we're honest, the reason why that motivational speech inspired you so much because your normal life isn't inspiring, because your normal life may be mundane. And what I know to be true, because I've had this personally happen to me, I've had this often where, I get fired up from hearing something or listening to something or reading something, and I may be on that high from, the emotional high for a few days, but eventually you come back down to reality and that emotion wears off. And if your mindset isn't changed, your life will not change. I'll repeat that again. If your mindset is not changed, your life will not change. A really good book that I love to glean from, and it's one that I think everyone should have, is As a Man Thinketh, So Is He. Phenomenal book, a small little book. I can drop some of the information in the section, in the info section, to be able to reference. But it's a book that really talks about as a man thinketh, or woman thinketh, so is he. So if you think you will not be successful, you absolutely will not be successful. I think outside of lottery winners, there is no one else on the face of this earth that has accomplished anything significant that didn't first think it. Our brains are incubators. Our brains are these things that the thing that you want out of life has to first exist there before it will ever become materialized. And so, again, for us, we are going to be uncovering, unpacking, living a pivoted life. Like I said, I want to be able to be a resource to everyone listening to this podcast right now, for everyone under the sound of my voice. I want to be a resource to you, to encourage you, to inspire you, to be able to pour into your mindset. I believe good teachers have good teachers. I believe good teachers are always learning. And so me personally, my goal is to pour back. And for me, guys, I struggled a lot with this podcast, and let me know if any of you guys identify with this, but I come to realize that it was a limiting belief of mine. But I thought, there's so many better people out there that podcast. There's so many other people that have better messages. There's so many other people out there that have a bigger following or bigger audience. Who would want to listen to me, right? Who would want to listen to little old Justin from Akron, Ohio, northeastern Ohio, small city? Our biggest claim to fame is LeBron James, who was born and raised in Akron, Ohio. But who would want to listen to this guy, right? Like, I'm not famous. I don't come from wealth. I'm on the journey of success. I do believe that I will have great success and great wealth eventually in the future. But I struggled with creating this podcast, quite frankly. I've struggled and starting to struggle with a lot of the things that I'm doing new in my life. But one of the things that I bumped into was understanding, one, that thought was a limiting belief for me. And I think not just myself, but so many people out there have limiting beliefs. They have things out there that can be subconscious sometimes. It could be things that you're not even noticing it's there in your mind. But there's a voice in your head that often tells you can't do something. And that voice is typically derived from maybe what you've seen, maybe derived from a past failure, a past experience that didn't go as planned, and you begin to, kind of like put your cards closer, right? You begin to now build this reflex motion, if you will, or you start to flinch, right? And there's something about being wide open. When I say being wide open is being free to be authentically yourself and not being so closed down and not being so reduced in your mindset and in your abilities. And so, guys, and I'm gonna end this with this because I think this is super important to the creation or the genesis of this podcast. I personally, a few months ago, had a pretty traumatic COVID experience, and for me, that was really the stake in the ground. That once I got out of the hospital, I said that I was going to do everything to live my life open. That I was going to do everything I could to pull every single thing that I thought was placed on the inside of me, that I was going to live a life radically to be able to serve, one, the God that I serve. I'm a spiritual person, but also to be able to serve other people. And I believe that I have been gifted in the ways that I am so that I can pour out and give to other people. And if my voice is different than your voice, my platform is different than your platform. And so I am called to reach demographic of people that I believe no one else on earth can reach. And so it's with that conviction that I start this podcast. It's with that conviction that I take this leap of faith. It's with that push that I feel convicted that I've got to get a message out to somebody, that I've got to get a word out to somebody, that whatever they're struggling with, no matter where they are, no matter how high of heights they've climbed or low of lows they've experienced, they too can live a pivoted life. And those that are successful decide to make the pivots. Simple. And for me, like I said, my COVID experience, I was almost on a ventilator. I ended up in the hospital for 7 days. It was a traumatic experience. I was on the highest flow oxygen that they had before they would have to bump me up to a ventilator. And that was one of the most out of control experiences I've ever had. There was nothing that I could do. There was nothing that a family member could do to get my lungs and my breathing back in order. I was literally in the hands of God, right? I was literally in the hands of the doctors and of the machine that was keeping me breathing. And there's something about staring at death, right? Or staring at potential death, or staring at something traumatic that I think shakes you up and makes you realize, one, how valuable life is and how fragile it is. But then two, you want to do your best to get everything that you've got out. And so I had an idea of doing this podcast before that traumatic COVID experience. But once I experienced it, once I went through that, it was one of those moments where it was like, no holds barred. We're going all in. We're going for it. And it helped me to strip those limiting beliefs that I had gained over years, limiting beliefs that I had heard from family members, or limiting beliefs that I had visually seen from having people in my family affected by certain things, or having people in my family lose at life, or me personally losing at life. I have had many failures, and the challenging part with failures is sometimes you don't know what you really lost. You could fail at something, you could lose something, and if you don't take the right inventory, you could have lost more than you thought you did. And so as I was addressing my limiting beliefs that have, I believe, helped me back in many areas of my life, I realized that because of the way that I'm wired, how my mindset is, I can typically, and this is often men do this, we just kind of lick our wounds and keep going. We often don't deal with our feelings and our emotions and how maybe something may have impacted us long term, and how to really address and deal with those things. And so, guys, this is the Pivot Mindset Podcast. We're going to be talking about living a pivoted life. We've got some amazing subjects and topics that we're going to be diving deep in. Again, we are going to be having some guests on the show, on the podcast. I'm super excited to bring my friends and all the people that I think are wildly successful and have great stories, not just about their success, but about their failures. We're going to dive deep into failures on the show. We plan to be real. We plan to be authentic, but also give you guys, I would call premium fuel, and I'll close the show with this. Um, if any of you drive any foreign cars or cars that have big motors that have a lot of functioning parts, that those cars need premium fuel. The reason why those cars need premium fuel is because they run at a higher level. They need a higher octane. They need a higher level of supply to be able to service the high functioning ability of the engine, of the motor. And you may be someone that's a high functioning motor. You may have a high functioning motor. You may be someone who is very aggressive at going for your goals in life. You may be wildly successful. You may have come from nothing and completely changed your entire family tree. But I'll tell you now that if mindset hasn't been changed, if you don't continue to renew your mind, it will be a challenge to make it to that next level. And that's what we're here to do. We're here learning together. We're growing together. And I'm excited to have you on board. Thank you. Please subscribe. Please, thanks for everything that this podcast will become, but it won't become it without your support. So please subscribe to the podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I will drop some more information on where to find us. But thank you again for checking this podcast out. And Justin signing out, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.